Welcome to Reimagining Anti-Violence Work, a small space where we're going to unpack the big issues currently impacting the anti-violence field and collectively dream up a new future. Hello, anti-violence workers, leaders, and anyone else that's made their way here. I'm your host, Steph Klotz, a former anti-violence worker and a member of the We Deserve Better project. Today, I'm joined by Michelle. Michelle has worked in the anti-violence movement since 2014. She earned a Bachelor of Science in Human Development, Family Studies, and Psychology from Penn State University and began her career as a health systems advocate with a local domestic violence program. In 2015, she expanded her work into anti-trafficking advocacy, developing a local anti-trafficking task force and response team to connect survivors with shelter and counseling services. She currently works for a state organization providing training and technical assistance to funded programs that offer resources and support to survivors of domestic violence and human trafficking. We'll be chatting with Michelle about her experiences in the field and how she uses her role in middle management to serve as a buffer for the staff she supervises. Welcome, Michelle. Thanks for joining me.
Hey, Steph, thanks for having me.
I am so glad to have you here. We don't spend a lot of time talking about, I've had the song stuck in the middle with you in my head all week thinking about recording this episode. We don't spend a lot of time talking about that. So I'm really excited because I know a lot of folks are in that position and really want to hear your advice and what you have to say. I want to start with a question that I ask everybody, which is what inspired you to become involved in anti-violence work?
Yeah, thanks for asking. It's I was trying to think about how to answer this question in a way that sounds cool, and I don't I don't know if I don't know if I can, but I really kind of came into it completely by accident and in such a like undergrad kind of way. So I went back to school at Penn State as what they refer to as a non-traditional student, which means I was old. And I had like a different I had a whole different life before I went back to school.
Yeah.
So I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do. And I was like, maybe I'll be a teacher. Maybe I kind of went through that whole trajectory and gravitated towards human development
Mm.
and family studies, because it just sounded really interesting to me. And it also sounded like I can still work with kids, but don't have to do quite the same level of work that you have to do to become a teacher.
Yeah.
So I started, human development and family studies, and I took a rhetoric course as like a one-off, because you have all of these different prerequisites that you have to do. And so I was like, rhetoric sounds cool. I'm an Englishy person, so I'll do that. And this rhetoric course, for lack of a better word, kind of radicalized me. Like, because you start learning about media literacy and I did a paper, and I feel this is where I feel like this is so deeply uncool because this is kind of like many people's trajectory to anti-violence work. But like, I did a paper on toys, right? And like the way that toys are marketed differently to girls and boys. And,
Mm.
once again, as I mentioned, because I'm old, like I was a kid in the 80s. And I remember, like, oh, I love Barbie. And you don't think about like, I still have Barbie. I'm like, when I see that color pink, it just like makes me feel so good. And I'm like, look at those shoes. I don't dress like Barbie. I certainly don't look like Barbie, but that is so ingrained in me. And I remember doing this whole paper and presentation about, just how early we are sort of indoctrinated into this idea of gender.
Oh my
Um,
gosh. Yeah, we could have a
right.
whole episode about just
For
that if we
sure.
had the time. One of my
For sure.
favorite things
I,
to talk about,
right. I
actually.
could probably dig that paper out because I definitely didn't throw it away because I don't throw anything away. Um, so I like did this paper, and like most people probably became incredibly insufferable. Not probably, I definitely became incredibly insufferable and was that person that was like, trying to watch the Super Bowl with my friends, and I was like, do you see how this commercial is positioned? Like
Oh
it's
my
fine,
God.
but you also can kind of, be a little fun at parties. So that's where things started.
I really
Of
resonate with it. Sorry, I'm
hometown,
just laughing
for
at my
sure.
like when I first got into the field, how like God bless my friends for dealing with me. Yeah.
Right, for sure. Thank you, everyone, for
Yeah.
sticking it out with me and getting to a point where we can all just hang out and it doesn't have to be a lesson in gender studies.
Yeah.
But it was very eye-opening to me because you get to a point in life where you think like I kind of have everything figured out, and it was a very like light bulb moment. So from there, I just started to really gravitate towards things that would allow me to kind of keep on learning about that and keep on advocating around that. And
Hmm.
in an effort to become less insufferable to my friends, I started to funnel that into school. So I started a club on campus, the Sexual and Gender Equality Club, which spelled SAGE, which I thought was incredibly cool, until I realized there's probably like 15,000 other groups that are called that. But I thought it was very progressive. And we, you know, partnered with the local program, the local domestic violence and sexual assault program, to bring a speaker to campus. And so through that, I met the folks at the program that I would eventually work for. And it was like one of those opportunities where like you meet people that are just as obsessive and like radicalized as you, and you're like, my people.
Yeah.
So I met them sort of towards the end. I was in my last year, and what was supposed to be an internship just kind of turned into a job offer. And that's how I started in with health systems advocacy, and which is like a near and dear to my heart form of survivor service, because it's so important and so underappreciated.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing
Yeah,
that. I love that. It's like so many folks that I've talked to, it's like these sliding doors moments where it's like just all these kind of things put you on the trajectory to land
yeah.
you in the spot that we are now. So,
Yeah, yeah, it's cool. It's cool to see like how so many of us just sort of like wound up here, but it's like finding your tribe, where you're like, ah, where have you all been all my life?
totally. Yeah, I think it's like something about really justice focused people
Yes.
where it's equity, justice, these things are really integral to the work. And I think it's just so refreshing to be around folks that have that in common.
Yeah, absolutely. And that don't make fun of you for wanting to pick apart all of the ways that,
Yeah.
patriarchy and,
Oh, yeah.
inequity show up in everyday. Like it's great to be around people that aren't going to be like, can you just stop?
Yeah, people, well, and people where you're like energized by, that reciprocal kind of relationship of really getting it and kind of talking about it on a deeper level versus people that are either asking you to stop or just tolerating you.
For sure. Yeah, yeah. And I think it's like I tell my staff a lot, like there's two kinds of people, right? Not really, but don't we love to say that? If only the world was binary. It's not. But like there's folks that are like, there's danger. I'm gonna have a normal human sense of, I don't mean to say normal, but like a sense of self-preservation. Like there's a fire over there, and I'm gonna walk away from that fire and try to save myself. And then there's folks, I always say, and then there's us, right? The folks that are like, I'm going to run in that fire and see if I can save someone, whether I have experience with that or not. Like there's folks that run towards danger, and there's folks that tend to run away from danger. And once again, like that's a very pithy, binary explanation. But I feel like folks in the advocacy world tend to be those folks that don't shy away from running towards something that might be off-putting for other folks.
Yeah.
And so even if it's like something as innocuous as like, let's have a conversation about this dumb commercial, it can be really refreshing when you're around folks who aren't sort of like, ooh, that makes me feel uncomfortable, which is like, I get that. Not everybody, some people just want to chill out and relax. And to me, and I think folks that are in advocacy, chilling out and relaxing is picking that stuff apart. it
Yeah.
is like getting able to have a conversation about things that are obvious to us that we're like, why is it that way? Why do we fall for propaganda? Why does this happen? And I think it's just so fun to be a part of a movement and a career path where there's a lot of us who are just like, yeah, let's relax by digging into inequity.
Yeah. Yeah. As you were saying that, what was coming up for me is just anti-violence work in general is
Mhm.
so anti what we have established in this country, right?
Yes.
Don't talk about it, don't acknowledge it when you see it right in front of your
Yep.
face. And so to be someone in that field, really just like, yeah, my whole life is actually about this thing that we're, as a society, wanting to pretend doesn't exist and sweep under the
Yeah.
rug. You have to
Yeah. And that
kind of
makes
be
people
like,
uncomfortable.
yeah, I'm really comfortable making you uncomfortable because
For sure.
uh, because
Yeah, as
that's
a
part.
former community educator, like that's the truth. Because you're like, let me set my table up with all of my anti-violence stuff and watch people like I don't even want to be seen walking up to that table because people might think that I'm in that category. And it's
Yeah,
like,
yeah. Or
we're
they
actually really
realize
fun.
they go get the lollipop and then they realize and they like disappear like Homer Simpson into the bush.
Exactly. Just into the book for sure.
Oh, oh my God. Yeah. Yeah. They're definitely like the scarlet letter. Uh,
Yes. Yeah, yeah. They always put you like in the corner. My favorite thing is if you're at a community education event and they don't quite know what you do, so you're like next to the bank or somebody fun. They always have like a game or a spinning wheel and they're handing out prizes and you're just like, "Hey. We're cool too."
I made a wheel one time as an educator, and I think it was like it landed on some sort of like spot where you got a fact and a piece of candy, but it was like
Yeah.
57% of homicides occur like after the victims left. Not funny, guys.
We
All my listeners
try
know though, right? That you're
so
just like
hard.
desperate to get people to listen to
Yeah. Yeah.
that.
Yep. Yep. I'm laughing because I think many of us are now like, yes, the wheel. We all remember like what can I do to make people just come up and talk to me? And the wheel is like,
People love spinning a wheel,
they
even if
do.
it leads to
Even if
stacks
it
of doom.
exactly. Here's your lollipop.
Oh my God. Yeah, 1,000 babies are born intersex.
Right.
Like
Fun
what?
fact.
Yeah. Oh my God. Yeah, you have to be really comfortable with that sort of thing for your whole mission to really be, like so in in the lurks. The
Yeah, yeah, we talk about all of the another metaphor I like to use, it's terrible, but like I was like, yeah, we're like when you pick up a big rock in your backyard and there's all this really weird stuff underneath of it that's like in the shadows and like it's all good, like all of those little grubby worms and bugs are important.
Yeah.
And sometimes I feel like we're like, hey, we're down here doing the grubby work and like you may not like it under here, but you need us.
Yeah. It's the truth. It really is the truth. And yeah, so I think you're right. I think that's one of the things, the experiences that I really truly miss is that camaraderie
Yeah.
with, my fellow coworkers at my former organization because yeah, it just takes such a different kind of person. And all these kind of like, values, the values that you hold internally really oftentimes align with the values that you are aiming to kind of use in your work. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, I think there's kind of just, really nothing like that camaraderie of people in the systems there.
Absolutely. And it's interesting when you sort of also I'm thinking to your listeners, I did not mean to make everyone feel like you're a grub worm under a rock. I hope that folks appreciate that like that's how I feel. I feel like I love advocates so much. And if anyone like comes away from this thinking that Michelle, she really has a
Oh,
low
no.
opinion. That's not, I do not mean to assume that at all. But I'm also kind of laughing because I feel like, I remember I have like all of us, we have friends that are outside of this work, right? We have friends that are, that have jobs that
Different kind of
don't.
paths. Yeah.
Exactly. You're not trauma bonding every moment of the day. And so I have like friends in the outside world. And I remember like somebody in my friend group started dating someone who it's another form of victim service, is child advocacy. And I remember like meeting this person and the two of us just being like, and gravitating towards one another because it's not that I love being in a space where I don't have to constantly be talking about the like the worst parts of human behavior and things that most people find off-putting, but there's also something so comforting when you kind of see someone or meet someone in a space that you don't expect, who also kind of has that 1,000-mile stare that they're trying not to like just like hang out and don't make it weird. And then you're able to, like, I just remember we started talking and immediately you could see everybody just sort of like backing away from us as we were like, did you ever work with this judge? And do you ever do that? It's just, it's a very specific kind of bond. And I love how quickly when you meet someone that comes from any sort of victim I hate the word victim, but like that it work, advocacy work, survivor centered work, um, you have this immediate connection. And like you may not have anything else in common, but when you have like, oh yeah, I worked in this county or I did this thing, or it just gives you something to bond over
Yeah.
in a way that feels really, really special, which I know sounds weird, but like it is a very close knit and powerful thing to be a part of, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. And I agree with that. My current role is educating child advocacy workers, or
Hmm.
um, really child protection workers. And
Yeah.
there is that so much shared values and experiences and a real just kind of like, I kind of get it, right? We get each
Hmm.
other on a different level. Yeah, it's something really, I'm sure there are lots of other fields that have that.
Of course.
But I think for me, what stands out is you have that like getting through tough times together, trauma bonding, all these like intense experiences, but also the shared set of values. I
Yes.
think that's really, which I think is for me what also makes the sometimes the values misalignment, right? When our organizations aren't necessarily
Yeah.
upholding the values that kind of like that's what we're here for.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny that you bring that up because I was having a conversation with a colleague of mine, another person in middle management who was an advocate actually, with me, right? So we were we worked at the same place and then, kind of moved into, the same kind of state level organization. And we were talking about, just the challenges that come up sometimes in a larger organization. When you work at a program, or, I call it a program, but you know what I mean, like an advocacy program where you're providing direct service. Everyone there sort of has, for the most part, until you maybe get up to like very administrative level, folks are familiar with working with survivors. They've done a certain level of direct service for the most part. There's exceptions to every rule. But like the bigger you get, right, whether it's working for a state organization or just a larger scale funder or something like that, you don't have as much of that, right? You don't have as many folks that come from the work directly.
Right.
And so we were just kind of joking around about things the way that you do when you're, trying to like get through a difficult time. And, so we were just kind of talking about some of the challenges that come up and having a little debrief session. And we were sort of saying, like, not that we want folks to have traumatizing experiences, right? Across the board. Like we don't want there to be a lot of survivors that need support. We don't want there to be a huge need for the work that we do. But at the same time, we were just having this kind of absurd conversation where like, I wish that everybody that worked here had the opportunity to work with survivors, like had the opportunity to really put time in working directly with survivors who need support. And we were kind of, we were joking around about the fact that that sounds so cruel, right, across the board, because you don't want it to sound like, man, I wish that every single person, we don't want it to sound like tourism, right? Like, obviously,
Sure.
we take this work very seriously. But the point of our conversation was there's something that shifts in you, and I'm going to give credit to my friend if they were listening to this podcast. This is you, not me, that said this. But there's something that shifts in your perception when you start to do direct service work. And I think that, like you said, there's all sorts of different professions where this is true. But in this case, for survivor work, there's a big difference between coming into the work because you feel passionate about it, even if you're coming from it from a personal perspective, which I think a lot of folks do. They've had, domestic violence or sexual assault or human trafficking or something like that, or family violence that has impacted them in some way, and it motivates them to want to, be a part of the movement. But there's a difference between coming into that movement at an administrative level or at a leadership level without having the opportunity to have a direct service role.
Yeah.
And when you have the opportunity to work one-on-one with survivors, it shifts your perspective, and it gives you the opportunity to have an understanding of the work that I think sometimes can go missing
Yeah.
when there's an imbalance, when there's too many folks who are making decisions at the top who don't necessarily have that perspective of working in the field with survivors.
Yeah. Like frontline boots on the ground, right?
Yes.
And and also, if you do happen to be in that situation where you're leading a field where you don't have that, the having the like foresight, being humble enough, I don't even know what word to use, but to really take your lead from the people with their boots on the ground, right?
Yes.
That like acknowledge that you don't have that lens, right? Like
Yes.
you can't, if I'm, 6'5", I don't know what it's like to be 4'11" in this world,
Right.
right? You
Exactly.
just can't possibly understand, right? And
Yeah.
so I think you have to listen to the person that has that experience, if
Yeah.
you happen to be in that position, right? Yes. Do I think that everyone should have the opportunity? And also, I still think that even when you do have that experience, that you should still be listening to the people that are currently on the front line because,
Absolutely.
you know,
Absolutely. I mean, I haven't done direct service work now for almost 9 years. And, I value that work so much and my experience with it, but it's changed. I'm certain, because I do, training in technical assistance, and like it hasn't changed dramatically,
sure.
but it's changed enough. Even health systems have changed. I did not have to provide direct service during COVID,
Right.
and the whole landscape shifted when that happened. So I couldn't agree more. I think that, and I think we see this sometimes with folks who have been in the work for a really long time. So there is absolutely a balance, because I think that there's folks that have been in the work for a long time, and that's how we kind of bypass that responsibility, because we say, oh, there's folks on our board that have been in the work for 30 some years. And it's like, well, that's great. Like, I don't ever want to discount the experiences of folks who have a history with this work because that's so valuable. But if that's the only if that's the only voice that we have
Yeah.
in those places, then we're not going to be able to have that progression. And it also, I mean, you and I can also probably talk for days about hierarchies and systems and what happens when you're not valuing, young voices
Right.
and, voices of folks that are, have been historically marginalized and disempowered. Like we see an, a failure to elevate that in the movement in general. And that system's everywhere. I mean, that's what we're here. That's what we're here. That's the inequity that we're here to, to fight against and to move the needle on. But even within our own movement, we still have a lot of looking in the mirror to do.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, you can't change anybody else till you change yourself. Right. And
Correct.
so if we're able to recognize like these things are happening here, well, the mission itself is only 50 years old. Right?
Right.
It's still a baby as far as
Yes,
like missions go, right?
for sure. For
Even
sure.
social problem identification. And so to say, this is what we did 30 years ago, right? Even for
Yeah.
me, when it's like 20 years ago when I was first hired, it's
Yeah.
so different. Like,
Yes.
for example, in New Jersey, they spill over when shelters are full, they spill over into like hotel
Yeah.
places. And I'm so glad that folks are able to be housed, right, when they were not
Yeah.
able to be housed prior. And also, that's a completely different landscape for advocates that are providing advocacy to people that are non-residential but are
Hmm.
considered residential. And it's just,
It's and it
that's
like
just
how
one,
much
yeah.
how much convincing did we have to do? Like, I same. Like I remember when the idea of putting a survivor in a hotel was like, how can you imagine? Like, how will they survive? And that I'm being like, but
Yeah.
I remember making that suggestion before, and it just there were all of these very, well-meaning reasons of why we couldn't do that. And I remember like when housing first started to really start to come out and talk about like the ways that we can be doing better for survivors. Part of that was really elevating mobile advocacy, and we're still sort of trying to convince folks like, what, you're allowed to meet with someone in a coffee shop. You're allowed to, you're allowed to think of ways to make your services accessible. And I feel like we came from a place of no for a really long time. And you're right. Like, we have to be willing to accept that. And I feel like sometimes there's resistance at the top to things that are working, right? Like we can say like this works really well, but they're like, oh, because I think we have I could remember when I was an advocate making those kinds of suggestions and internalizing the no. Do you know what I mean? Like I got told no so completely that it was ingrained in me that that's not an okay thing to do for survivors without a whole lot of explanation besides liability.
Mm.
And so now that we're sort of moving past that and finding ways to be more accessible, I know how challenging it was for me as in the 50-year spectrum, a relatively new advocate. So I can't imagine how difficult it must be for folks who created the no, right? Who were the ones that said no to begin with, for once again, very good reason. Like I'm not trying to say that this was something that they did and they were wrong,
Mm.
but we've moved past that. We've progressed as we should as a movement. But when you have folks at the top who remember making that decision and being really clear about why they were making that decision, who are now being told, what, we want to move into a place where a brick and mortar shelter might not have to be the only option or even the option. We might be able to move into a place where that's not necessary anymore. I think that that challenges ego And I think that when you have internalized that so much, it's just hard. It's very difficult to be able to shift, which is why we need more of those voices at the top to say, no, no, I did it. I did it and it worked. And everything's still fine and I'm still fine and the world still spins and we can do things different. And survivors benefited from it, right? Like,
And here are some of the ways that it could be even more successful, right? And here are some of the
yes,
challenges that came up that don't mean this isn't something worth pursuing, but perhaps there are other needs for advocates in order to be able to meet survivors in that way. And so really
yeah,
thinking about all the ways in which we can kind of lead with curiosity and, you know, um, expansion to these new
yeah.
ideas, right? Like it is really challenging.
Yeah. And to be inclusive, because I feel like one of the other challenges is I don't ever want anyone to feel like they're not welcome in this work. And so I think it's striking a balance of, making sure that the folks that are seasoned still have a place, right? It's not about saying their voice and perspective don't matter anymore. It's just about like we all know what it's like to be in an echo chamber. It's not helpful. And so if there's a lack of mentorship and a lack of opportunity for folks who are starting out in their career to see a clear way to move into those leadership roles, into that board position, into that executive directorship, if we don't make a clear way for them, then we create an echo chamber.
Mm.
And so I don't want to be misunderstood to say that I think that those folks with 30 years of experience like aren't valuable. But I think that if we don't have all of the perspective, then we don't get to have those conversations that you're describing, right? We don't get to have all of those perspectives and come to consensus. It just turns into what I tend to experience and definitely experienced as an advocate, which is, oh, this is the way we've always done it.
Mm.
And it's tempting to stay in this is the way we've always done it. And as someone who's now sort of creating training and creating, curriculum and creating technical assistance opportunities, I have to be careful. And we joke around about this a lot on my team of like, in 10 years, there's going to be some young advocate that's coming up that's going to tear this apart. And how are we preparing to receive that? Because if we know how it feels to be told, nope, this is the way we've always done it, we have to be prepared when our work gets challenged, when things start to progress, to be able to say, that hurts, but cool. Let's talk about it and let's figure out how we can, start to progress even more.
Yeah, I mean, otherwise you stay stagnant, right? You have to
Yeah,
adapt. A tree holding on to dead leaves.
exactly.
Um,
Exactly.
yeah, and I think that's the phrase, the way we've always done it. I mean, let's think about lots of things that we've always done in this country. That's what comes up for me is like, yeah,
Yep.
the way we've always done it sucks.
Yep. Not
Effing blows. And the
ideal.
case for continuing to do it that way is incredibly short. I can't think of a thing other
Yeah.
than the
Yep.
comfort of this is what we've been doing. And so we don't have to change, right? Like,
Right. Right.
even that, it's not comfortable. This
No.
isn't. So, the way we've always done it is, whew, uh,
Yeah.
there's, is there value in that, right? Sure. Sometimes you don't want to recreate the wheel.
Yeah.
And also,
Yeah.
sometimes that's not what you need.
No. And it's about finding that balance. And I think we were talking either earlier, even before we started recording, about like how do you how do you start to really unpack power and privilege in this work? And, the way that we've always done it, I mean, if we if we want to, if we want to be honest, you know, I love this work and I love this movement and I love everything about anti-violence and all of it, right? Like obviously I've been obsessed with it since I learned it was a thing.
Right.
But what I've also learned in my trajectory is how exclusive this movement has been, and how, I mean, if if you look at the history of the women's movement, there's so many fabulous and wonderful and groundbreaking things that we've been able to do in 50 years of feminist anti-violence work. And there's also so many people that have been left out of it. So many people that have contributed to it and been ignored, and that have, that we have appropriated from. And so without accountability for that, like within our work as advocates, we are out there, advocating for social justice and advocating for equity and advocating for communities that are safer. But within our movement, we still have a lot of work to do to think about, have we even been accountable for the fact that, our movement has neglected the needs of marginalized folks. And I say that with love. I say that as a middle-aged, middle-class, white, straight woman who, is the hallmark of this work and the hallmark of the voice that has created a lot of this system, and it benefits me the most. And
Yeah.
so as someone who stands to benefit the most from it, I'm responsible for thinking about my trajectory differently,
Yeah.
and thinking about like, how do I make sure that I am not just setting the stage for more of me, if that makes sense.
No, it does make sense. And I think, one example is like reliance on carceral systems in this way.
Yes.
You know, Black women, brown women, everyone on the margins has been saying that's not a good solution.
Yep, that ain't it.
And, it turns out it's not really the greatest solution for anybody. There is a
No.
2022 law enforcement survey that was done by the National Domestic Violence Hotline. And in this survey, all their callers that participated in the survey, they asked them like whether or not they had called the police, and
Mhm.
if they had called the police, if they felt safer, if they hadn't called the police, what was the reason? And across all backgrounds,
Mhm.
populations, including white women,
Mhm.
50% of people felt no difference in safety following police response. Maybe it was even 60. And and then 29% felt less safe. And then
Mhm.
the remaining 21% felt no difference in safety
Yeah, yeah.
or felt safer. Sorry.
Right, right,
It's a
right, right,
small
right.
percentage that felt safer.
Yeah, yeah.
So it's only working for, what's that, 1 in 5 folks
Yeah,
felt safer.
yeah, yeah.
And again, it's just not the right solution for this particular problem, which police are cast with responding to many things that maybe shouldn't be in
Yeah.
their court, right? And this just happens to be one of those situations where when we talk about like, oh, all the reasons we need police, it's like, well, for domestic violence, right? And it's like,
Mhm.
well,
Not really.
it's not really working there either, right? And so again, this is really kind of all long-winded to say this is something that women of color in this movement have been saying from the get-go.
Yeah, from the
And
start.
continually, the movement has driven forward with that legal response and carceral
Mhm.
systems.
Mhm. Mhm.
And,
Yeah.
and it's not really working, right? Even for
No.
the people that hold the most privilege, right?
Yeah.
In that system. And for the folks that hadn't called the police, like 96% were afraid of police response.
Imagine that. And like, if you look at, and like, we don't have to hop down this rabbit hole. But I mean, if you also look statistically at the, how do I say this delicately? Like, what happens if in your community, the folks who are, contributing to violence are also part of those carceral systems, right? Like, so, and I think it's just something that we need to be willing to talk about. Like, it may not be everywhere, but many places there are folks who aren't going to call or feel safe calling law enforcement because their partner is either a member or is connected in some way.
Right.
And so, it's if we're just leaning on one solution, then we're doing a disservice to folks who are never going to benefit from that system, no
Right.
matter what.
Yeah. Well, it goes back to the lens, right? We need everybody's lens to be just as valuable. And when we're in a hierarchical structure, you have to really be strategic and purposeful about how you're rebalancing those inequities, right? So
Yeah.
if you say that we need hierarchy in order to make decisions, which is what I've heard, right?
Yeah.
That that okay,
Sure. Right.
fine,
Okay.
fine, I'll give you that. I disagree respectfully, but
Sure.
okay,
Yeah.
in your system, you need this hierarchy to make decisions. How are you actively giving away your power in that hierarchy to the people lower than you
Right.
so that you all hold equal power in that system and everyone's viewpoint and voice matters
Mm-hmm.
equally? And again, it sounds really challenging to do, but
Does
if you're
it? I don't know.
uh, yeah, but so I think it's any time where we're looking at the way that people hold privilege in a or intersectional way that you might hold
Yeah.
privilege or experience marginalization that changes in every space that you're in and every place that you're in. Let's start with our domestic violence systems,
Hmm.
our own organization, right? Our
Hmm.
mission as a whole,
Yeah.
yourself, your own self.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And like, how do we root it out there, right? Because I think it's, or also, I think part of the reason that I'm so excited to have you here is like, and how do you see what you do now in this kind of like middle management role as an opportunity to filter or buffer some of those
Hmm.
things for folks?
Yeah, because like you we are forced to live in a hierarchy, right? Like until we're able to, to progress to the point that that's not how it is. That's how it is. Like that's just, I don't know of any personally, large or small organizations in this work that are really like throwing that out the window. I'm sure they exist. And if you do, please like hire me. But but
Okay.
we have to navigate through that. And I think that, we start to challenge that idea of hierarchy by doing exactly what you said, right? Like if you're going to say hierarchy is the way to do it, then we have to be willing to create healthy hierarchy, which sounds like an oxymoron to me. Because if you have power that's consolidated at the top, that is by nature inequitable, right? It's just there's no that is so we can't
Right.
like it's ironic to me that we're like, yes, equity and anti-violence, but also like five people at the top have all the
But
power and
also,
make the
you
most
can't have a
money.
system that doesn't have inequity, or else you won't
Exactly.
survive.
Exactly. We're a snake eating its own tail. So, and so to me, like, being in middle management is such a weird place because I'm so passionate about this work and I'm passionate about being a trauma informed supervisor, right? Like I feel like I got this opportunity. I'm like, now I'm going to put my money where my mouth is, and I'm going to do it the way that I've always wanted to. And I try really hard. And also, there's challenges to that, because you are now a part of the hierarchy, and it's challenging. So I think one of the things that has been really important to me, sometimes to my own detriment, is just a commitment to transparency and accountability. And like that, those are buzzwords within, the trauma informed community. Like, we can say that, we can say, right. I'm being transparent. And I feel like I've been in situations in many different, organizations and professional places that I've been, where, leadership knows what to say, right? Oh, we're, in full transparency, we're going to do this. But it takes a lot of nuance and skill to be able to do that in a way that's ethical, and to still maintain accountability. Because when you're in leadership, you do have, like, an organization is its own thing. There's rules, right? There should be
Yeah,
there
there's
should be
rules, there's a culture. It's yeah,
right.
it's
There
its
should
own.
be HR. There should be things that you are obligated to say and obligated not to say, right? Like, and those things exist for a reason. It's not just to cover your own ass. It's that you're creating a system that ideally is meant to protect the folks with the least amount of power. So, as a supervisor, it's really important for me to be able to be transparent with my staff, to say, okay, at my organization, we have an open door policy, which means that, like, if something's going on, you can talk to me, you can talk to someone else. We want you to feel safe and happy here. What we might not understand that we need to say, and I didn't until I took the time to actually read our handbook, which, like, ew, but also do it, because there's stuff in there that you need to know when you're a manager. There's things that I probably shouldn't know, because I'm obliged to say something about it. Do you know what I mean? Like, in an organization, there is a line in the sand that if you, as a staff person, tell me something, I then have to tell someone else about it. And those things are there for a reason.
Right.
But we wouldn't do that to a survivor, right? Like, we wouldn't. So when survivors come to us, we give them the facts, right? We say, hey, I'm here to help. Here's the things that I can keep private. Here's the things that I can't, right? I'm a mandated reporter.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
if you tell me anything that has to do with child abuse, I'm a mandated reporter. I'm going to have to make a report
Yeah.
about that. And I'm saying that up front.
Right. Informed consent about the limits of
Correct.
confidentiality. Yeah.
Exactly. I mean, it's in our blood as advocates to make sure that if you're going to be vulnerable with me, I am going to protect your vulnerability by telling you exactly where my line in the sand is, and then you can make a choice if you wish to cross it or not. And even that, I've had philosophical conversations with so many folks that are like, well, but if abuse is happening, don't we want to know so that we can report it, and blah blah blah, and not blah blah blah, but you know what I mean? Like, it's a very philosophical conversation, but what it boils down to for me is, if you're coming to me for help and support for something, you deserve to know what my responsibility is, so that you can choose to share what you want to or not. And that's like, I will not waver on that. Prove me wrong. But so as a manager, though, we have the same kind of role and responsibility. If somebody on my team is experiencing harassment, if they have a health issue, if they have something going on that is significant and they tell me, I have certain obligations to my organization. I don't agree with that. I don't think that that's necessarily the right thing, but it's what I have to do.
Yeah.
And I it's very important to me as a manager that I make that clear to folks, that I want them to talk to me. I want them to tell me what's going on. And I also want them to know that, listen, if you talk to me about something that has to do with any of these things, there's a chance I'm going to have to tell HR, for the good of the organization, good in air quotes for those that can't see me, right? Because I've watched this play out in ways that are not survivor centered and not trauma informed, where, sadly, someone in an organization was experiencing harassment and just weren't ready for it to blow up, right? They were not prepared. And we wouldn't do that to a survivor of sexual violence if they came to us. We wouldn't say, well, you told me and now I'm sorry, but I have to call the cops, right? Like, we've fought so hard to make sure that that doesn't happen. Now, does that still happen sometimes? Yes, but it shouldn't, right? If somebody is coming to you to say, I've experienced this thing, I'm coming to you as on a hotline call, or I'm coming to you because you're sitting next to me in a forensic exam, I've made a commitment to that person that, like, whatever you choose to do is what I'm going to help facilitate. But we don't always extend that to our organizations in the same way. The rules are different, but it doesn't mean that we don't have the same responsibility to our staff, many of whom are also survivors, right? Like,
Yeah. It makes me think of the fact that HR really is protecting the organization, not the
correct.
individuals, and
Yeah.
that it's not really the policies and procedures aren't trauma informed. They are,
No.
liability informed.
Yeah.
Um, and so, really it all comes back to that, right? And the whole structure of our organizations, that when
Hmm.
it's decisions are made just from that one lens, right? It's
Hmm.
like continually gets baked into the system in the way that the system protects those with power, right? It's like,
Yes.
it's not shocking, right? Because that's the way every other system in our,
Yeah.
world, country, at least works. And also, it's the system in an abusive household.
It
How do
feels gross to have to, and like, this is something that I have talked about a lot, is it feels really gross to get to a point in an anti-violence career where you have to take a look at the system that you're a part of, that you believe in, and come to terms with the fact that it is kind of an abusive relationship.
Yeah, yeah.
Does not feel great.
No, it does not.
And like, that is an unpopular opinion. FYI, other middle managers out there, if you bring that up in a staff meeting, you're probably not going to get the response that you think you will. Because speaking truth to power remains unpopular. But
Weird.
I know, right? Like, who knew?
Oh, yeah. Who
um,
knew?
but it's also, kind of going back to what I was saying before, like, with this idea of mentorship and this idea of making space, I sort of abandoned a while ago aspirations for my own ability to create a cushy position for myself, right? I would love, part of me, the part of me that's indoctrinated into capitalism is like, woof, wouldn't it be nice to be, to be sitting at the top? But the reality of that is, yeah, I love having stuff and I love making money. But we don't get into this work for the fame, the money, and the recognition. We just don't. And you know, the fact that there are even folks in this work that are making corporate salary. I mean, listen, I want everyone to be happy and to have their needs met, and all of those things. But I think when we know that advocates, for the most part, are making under or just minimum wage, and then there are folks in this work who are making six-figure salaries. I'm not trying to diminish the hard work that goes into, what you need to do to be in a leadership role. This isn't about, usefulness. This isn't about worth. This isn't about anything besides equity.
Yeah.
And, for me, what I have witnessed is the folks that tend to be able to get to that high level are the folks that are able to perform professionalism. I
Mm.
don't see a whole lot of people like me. And like I'm describing, you can see me right now, right? Like I'm a tattooed woman. I have weird colored hair. I don't look professional, and I carry an insane amount of privilege, right? So I don't see a lot of folks like me. I certainly don't see a lot of folks that have less power and privilege than me. I
Right.
see a lot of people that are able to perform professionalism. And if we don't start to challenge that, then we're like we were saying, we're just not going to create that systemic change that we need. So going back to me speaking truth to power in a staff meeting, I'm not making my way up the chain by doing that.
Mm-mm.
But I like to think that by starting to use the privilege and power that I have, which is minimal as a middle manager, but it's more than I ever thought I would have when I started this work. And so there's always a temptation to stay, well, just, stay in line, toe the line, don't speak up, don't challenge, don't get fired, don't do all of these things. But to me, there's a responsibility as well to start to walk it like I talk it,
Yeah.
and to be able to show to my staff and to other folks who feel like they may not have a seat at the table that no, we're working on dismantling those systems and starting to turn inward, and force folks to look at it. And it's going to take, unfortunately, a long time and a lot of folks stepping out of the way so that we can mentor other people to start to rise up into those positions. So I see my role as a middle manager as a mentorship
Mm.
more than a ladder to the top, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, I think it does make sense, especially when we're thinking about an environment that looks to grow and nurture folks along their journey to increase responsibility and different roles within the organization. So,
Mhm.
yeah, I just think it's a different way of thinking about, I'm not in charge of these folks. I am shepherding them to
Yes.
to this this way of doing the work. And then, one day the student will become the master, just like you were
Ideally.
talking about, of like the materials that I create will be outdated and
Hmm.
replaced by some newer vision, which is, exactly the point.
Yeah. And hopefully we create opportunities for there to be collaboration moving forward, right? Like whether it's me or someone that has, that I've had the opportunity to mentor and supervise, like I hope that we're starting to cultivate a different kind of climate and system where collaboration is welcomed instead of it feeling threatening. And I think that we are still really stuck in a place where, power protects itself.
Yeah.
And, and I get that, like it's ingrained in us, just like, buying Barbie dolls was ingrained in me as a kid. But, you have to train yourself out of it. And you have to train yourself out of wanting to protect your own ego and power. You have to be willing to share. Like that's the thing that, and you and I could probably talk for another, 2 hours about capitalism and patriarchy and all of those things that kind of contribute to systems that protect the power that they've accumulated. But if we're going to really move the needle the way that we say we do in anti-violence work, then, the folks in power really need to take a look at how they can share it.
Yeah.
If they don't, then we're failing. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, Michelle, because not only for all the reasons that we've already addressed, right, is that shared power is so important, but it also is one of the protective factors when we look at like vicarious trauma for folks.
Yes,
When there's
absolutely.
shared power in organizations, it helps mitigate the
Yeah.
impact of vicarious trauma.
Yep.
And again, all these things are so interconnected, right? But without putting aside that ego, I think is really the thing that you said that kind of like really set the fireworks off in my brain because somehow leadership became equated with like needing to know everything and having
Yeah.
all the answers. And
Hmm.
my gosh, that is so contrary to the skills and, qualities that I would define in what makes a good leader, right?
Yeah,
Like,
same.
first of all, nobody knows everything.
Right. Like
The
how
person that
terrifying.
tells you they know everything is definitely dangerous. Yeah, you should be concerned
Yes.
about them. But yeah, this idea of like you have to be able to listen to what others have to say, to
Hmm.
acknowledge that your perspective isn't the only one that matters,
Hmm.
to really admit when you don't know something and really see
Hmm.
that as a strength, right? Like
Yeah.
it's a strength to be like, hey, I don't know that. You know what
Yeah.
I do know though? I have a whole team of people that specialize in that thing. Lucky
Yeah.
me.
Yeah. Yeah.
Lucky
Yeah.
me. Right? I
Yeah.
don't need to know everything or pretend that I do because if I pretend that I do, the people that on my team that actually get it are going to be able to see
Right. They're
right
gonna be like,
through it.
yeah.
But
Yeah.
yeah, this idea of like sharing power, acknowledging, the limits to your own grandiosity.
Hmm.
Um,
And not being indispensable. Like, and I feel like we start cultivating this at the ground level. Like I remember myself, and I hear this still a lot from advocates that I work with and train, that, when I started doing human trafficking advocacy, I was the human trafficking person, right? Like that was so,
Sounds
you know,
familiar. Yeah, good.
right?
Go on.
Right? Like, and so, and it's like, I didn't have to do anything special. I just showed, like, we got a grant and I was the one that was able to take on more work. Do you know what I mean? Like, it wasn't like I had to go through special training to be able to do this. And this is not to discount folks that do. I'm
Right.
saying my experience is I was doing a job and we got more money to do a different job. And they took a look at my team and they were like, Michelle's the newest one and has the most time in her already packed schedule. So now you are doing human trafficking work as well. And which was fine with me because I thought it was interesting, and I was really, like, as soon as I started getting into it, I was really passionate about it. But it turned into Michelle's the expert, which I promise you I was not. I
Right.
was just the person who was working on it the most and creating those inroads and networks and things like that. But it got to the point where when a trafficking survivor was referred to our program, if I was out of the office, if I was on vacation, if it was a weekend and I was somehow not on call, which was almost never, like, that person was like, well, you're gonna have to wait until Michelle's back in the office, which
Oh
to
my good
me,
God.
I
Yeah.
was like, no, that's not, like, that should never, ever, ever be the way that we engage with this work, but it happens so often. And it happens because I think, at least in my relatively uneducated opinion, I think because nonprofits sort of took on this corporate structure, we got relegated to roles and deliverables related to roles. And so it became like, oh, well, this is the person who's getting grant funded to do this work. And so if somebody else starts to do it, how are we going to code it? How are we going to do this? And it creates this real silo effect.
Yeah.
And we take that with us as we kind of grow in the work. So even when you get up to a larger organizational structure, we take that with us. And I think I'm the sort of person that is unafraid to say that I don't know something, and I realize that that's rare.
Yeah.
uh, but it's probably related to a lifetime of imposter syndrome. But like, if somebody asks me a question, I don't like, I've gotten to a point where even as an organization, like a state organization person, I'm like, you know what, I'm not sure about that, let me ask a grown up.
Right.
um but that's not something that I see often, and I don't see in higher levels of leadership. What I see are folks that get very protective, that don't want to look like they don't know the answer, that don't want to share power by saying that I don't know the answer to that question, let me ask my colleague, and don't want to share their knowledge or expertise with other people because that's what makes them special. And I get it, man, humans love feeling special, we love it, it's so rare, and it's so like, oh, you feel great, it lights up parts of your brain. And if you're steeped in trauma all the time, that thing that makes you feel special becomes even more important to you.
Yeah.
It's like an addiction. And so I get why it's so difficult, but I also see how detrimental it is to our work, because you have folks that are kind of sitting at the top who don't know how they're going to leave. How do you retire when you have been solely responsible for a huge part of a program for 20 some years and have been so resistant to sharing that power with anyone that the moment you leave, that whole project might disintegrate because no one understands the nuance of it? But we've painted ourselves into a corner that way because we've made it so appealing.
Right. Yeah, and like kind of going back to what you about before with mentoring, it's like you hopefully should be mentoring your team to be able to kind of fill
Yeah.
those shoes seamlessly, right?
Yes.
That's part of the job for for this work, but it doesn't always happen, you're right.
No. No. Oftentimes I know that I've seen numerous times, you know, folks with advocacy experience who maybe don't have management experience,
Right.
and certainly don't have high level management experience. So you have folks that come in that are amazing, right? Like I have members of my team who have figured it out like only an advocate can. We joke around on our team that many of us too are only children. And so like you combine being an only child with being an advocate and you're like, I will figure it out myself. Like, I don't need someone to show me budgets. I'm going to sit here and I'm just going to figure it out myself. And they do, right? Like, only child or not, like I've seen so many folks that just figure it out themselves and do it a fantastic job,
Yeah.
but they don't have it on paper, right? They don't have the certificate. They don't have the 5 years of experience. They don't have, they've been just, plugging away, doing whatever their role is within their organization, and like, helping survivors and doing all of these things that are so important, and doing it like in a MacGyver kind of way that's like so incredible. I said MacGyver, like I'm old. Like I don't know if
Oh, I know
anybody
who
remembers who
MacGyver is.
MacGyver. Thank you. That makes me feel so much better. If people don't know, he was Canadian and fixed stuff with like a hockey ticket. It was great. He was amazing. I'm not entirely sure exactly what MacGyver actually did or was, but he fixed things with very little to go on, duct tape and whatever else. Anyway, that's advocates, right? Like they're just out there figuring shit out for themselves. And because they're figuring shit out for themselves, they don't get a seat at the table because they don't have the resume. When somebody sees a resume that says advocate, direct service for 10 years, systems advocate, They don't see budget because we're not allowed to do the budget. We understand the budget. We understand that, you tell me I don't have money for anything until, May. And then you're like, we have an extra $2,000 to spend. And you're like, show me the money. I will find a way to make that happen. So they're really good at doing things creatively. But once again, if you think about that kind of patriarchy, white supremacy culture that says we value professionalism that comes with a price tag on it. You pay the
Right.
money, you have the MBA, you have this, you have what
Agree.
it takes.
Yeah.
And so I see folks being passed over and not mentored. And instead, folks come in from out of the work.
Right.
And I don't want to discourage folks from doing that. We want you, come, but be prepared to not start at the top, right? And instead, we see folks that are coming into leadership positions that don't really have a good understanding of the work or trauma informed survivor centered advocacy. So they're working in a field for survivors and also with survivors
Yeah.
who shouldn't have to say, hi, I'm a survivor, right? We know better than to do that, hopefully. So they're not prepared for the unique environment that they're coming into. And I feel really strongly about this because we devalue survivor leadership in our field. We devalue survivor participation in our field. Survivors are still, by and large, our client and not an integral part of our movement. And they are. Like, I'm here to tell you, if you're listening and you're a survivor and you're in this work, you're so fucking important. Like, please. And but we don't elevate that. We don't, when it's Domestic Violence Awareness Month, we're not saying, hey, advocates who are also survivors, thank you, right? Thank you for like being here and for doing this. And so when folks come in from outside of this work and they're just applying what they learned in school to supervision, they're missing this huge portion of how to connect and create rapport and meaning. And they're missing an opportunity within organizations to say, hey, amazing advocate that's been doing it on your own and figuring it out for 10 years. I think you have such great leadership potential. Let me take you under my wing. Let me give you this opportunity and mentor you and show you how to do all of this stuff and show you how to, refine the skills that you've developed on your own and to make that a skill set that's valued, right? Like to make that ability to learn it yourself and to do things on your own something that is valuable and meaningful instead of, oh, I have an MBA and, I know how to, use Excel really well. If you know how to use Excel really well, bless you, because I don't.
Yeah, I think that, the ways that intersectionally impacts the movement, right? It both kind of brings people in from the out just because they've had those have those degrees, have the money to pay for those degrees.
Yes.
But, when we think about typically like who has access to money for schooling and all
Yeah.
and time and all these things, the people on the margins are kept out of leadership positions because of all those pieces, right? So
Yeah.
it really just continues to perpetuate
Mm-hmm.
this white woman-led system, right?
Yep.
Again, I too am a middle-aged white woman. Um, and also, right, how do we acknowledge that, remove the shame from it so that we can actually do
Mhm.
something differently?
Yeah. And not make middle-aged white woman experiences the standard.
Right.
Because when I do see folks moving up who are not middle-aged white women, they're still expected to like
I
perform in that way.
was just going to say perform whiteness. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So like, you you have to be this like certain way.
Yeah.
And if you're not, whether you're actually a middle-aged white woman or just someone that's able to, perform in that way, in a way that makes you feel quote unquote safe
Mm.
And I also, I have no issue with folks who are experienced and have, the time and ability under their belt to come into this work. This work should be available to everyone. But I do also see a lot of internalized misogyny in this work as well. And folks who, there's just a lot that we still have left to unpack. And the more that we wait, the more that we're missing the opportunity to share power with folks who just don't ever get a seat at the table.
Yeah.
um and it's a shame.
Yeah. Well, Michelle, I could talk to you all day about many of the topics that we've kind of gone over, but I want to, just for the sake of the time of our listeners, wrap things up.
Sure.
Any last advice that you have for middle management at anti-violence orgs that are looking to, you know, recognize what power they have and make a difference where they can?
Yeah, I mean, I think the final thought that I have is just to, I hope that what we've talked about today has given some folks some food for thought. I think that at the end of the day, as middle managers, remembering that our staff are humans and treating them like humans and creating relationships and just doing your best to help keep your staff informed, engaged, and to not fall into the trap of thinking, that just because you are in a leadership position that makes you inherently better or worse than anyone else, right? We're all just humans doing our best for survivors. So I think that creating rapport with your team, being honest with your team, protecting them, but not lying to them, right? Like there's so much that we can do to just honor the work that they do, and that's what I try to do. At the end of the day, I may not be able to, do the things that I want to do for my team because I think they're all amazing human beings. And if I could promote all of them and, I wish that I could do all of the things. But one thing that I can do is make them feel special and to acknowledge their humanity and make sure that I am always treating them with respect, that I'm honest with them, and that I'm accountable, not just for my own stuff, but for the organization stuff. My team accuses me of apologizing for stuff that's not my fault, and I stand by that because they may not get an apology otherwise.
Mm.
So if my organization is doing things that I think are weird or that impact them in a way that's unfair, I make sure to let them know that I see that and that there may not be anything that I can do about it, but that I'm going to acknowledge it because we unintentionally gaslight our staff a lot. And we can do a great service by just taking the time to look at where we might be accidentally or on purpose engaging in what we talked about before, like that stuff that really mirrors those abusive relationships, and being an advocate about it. We're advocates and we can apply what we have learned as advocates to our work in management as well. And that has worked really well for me.
Yeah, thank you, Michelle. Really meaningful and um, small but significant suggestions. One of the other pieces that helps buffer vicarious trauma is a great supervisor, right? Having somebody in the
Yeah.
workspace that you can trust and rely on. So it really does make a huge difference, right? It really has, an umbrella effect, even
Hmm.
if there's things trickling down from the top that maybe aren't the greatest. So I want to thank you so much for joining me today and for sharing your perspective on how supervisors and middle management can protect their staff from toxicity or abuse in the workplace. Hopefully, all of you listening out there learned something or were inspired to use your role to do the same. If you're currently navigating values misalignment, abuse, toxicity, and or exploitation in your workplace, Know that you aren't alone and that you deserve better. If you or someone you know is interested in joining the We Deserve Better project or in being a guest on the podcast, check out the show notes for details on how to connect. Thanks for listening. Remember, anti-violence work is neither anti-violent nor working to end violence. So keep talking and reimagining amongst yourselves.